Well, hello out there. I hope you are absolutely thriving despite this crazy summer and crazy year we find ourselves in. I hope you're staying safe and staying healthy out there. My name is Christopher Carter. I will be your host. I'm a coach for founders and executives and meditation teacher for organizations. Every episode, we look at the connection between building a conscious life and building a conscious team or a conscious business. Our lives and well-being are intimately connected to the people we interact with the most. With the leaders I coach, their lives and businesses are held together by relationships. We talk a lot about our families at home, our families at work, and how important it is to stay in sync with the people closest to us. The quality of our lives is directly correlated to the quality of our relationships. Jamieson and Bob Gower have been working with entrepreneurs and organizations for decades. You may know Alex as the co-star of the Oscar-nominated documentary Super Size Me. She is also a coach and best-selling author of 5 books. Her husband Bob is a speaker, author, and consultant for organizations. I've observed them both as a married couple. They have always been fiercely committed to creating a high level of transparency and connection in their relationship. They have taken these values for clear communication and wrote a great new book for leaders called Radical Alignment: How to Have Game-Changing Conversations That Will Transform Your Business and Your Life. And when I think about 2020, other than all the craziness that's happening, it seems to be a year of challenging conversations. If we're not figuring out how to homeschool our kids, we're figuring out how to navigate our families, some of which want to wear masks and others don't. In these difficult conversations that we're having day in and day out, it helps to have a framework or some sort of path to follow. And what Alex and Bob have done is that they've broken down this usually difficult process into 4 simple steps that not only get you through a difficult conversation, but create what they call radical alignment, where you end up getting a deeper understanding of the person sitting across from you. You end up deeply appreciating one another and getting into this state of total sync. And I got a lot of value out of having this conversation that follows with them about creating their own book. We actually use the framework to break down how they got into agreement and partnership over writing the book together. So check this conversation out. You're going to learn a lot about communication and having empowering conversations with the people closest to you. Pay careful attention to the 4 steps of the all-in method. There's also a cheat sheet in the show notes. Go grab that. It's going to be a opt-in later on, but it's a freebie now for this Epic Life subscribers. Please enjoy this knowledge-filled, far-ranging, and authentic conversation with my good friends Alex Jamieson and Bob Gower. You are the example of the power couple, so I'm super excited for this.
Ooh, look at us.
I'll take that.
All right.
I'll take that. It doesn't feel that way over here, but I'll take it.
I almost wanted to bring my wife Gail along. Not that she has any interest whatsoever in my work. I mean, I think she does. I think she secretly does. Even just to have her by my side to try to match the power of the power couple, because I'm outnumbered and outgunned here. I'm going to do my
Have you
best.
listened to Mike Birbiglia's podcast he's got going right now?
A little bit. And I keep heering great things. Like everyone keeps talking to me about it.
So he had his wife come on one where they interviewed the 2 people from the National, the kind of power couple that runs the National, and they talked about being a couple and being creative couples, and it was
I haven't listened to that one yet.
It's a really, really, really fascinating podcast.
Cool.
It's great.
Why don't we just kick off on couples for a second? Who are the couples that you look at? Any couple goals type of couples?
Barack and Michelle.
Oh yeah. Seriously.
I mean, like, ridiculous. Actually, my aunt and uncle, Bo and Paul, they were married the summer I was born, and they've been a musical duo since before I was born.
Wow.
So they've been performing music together for like 50 years.
Folk music?
Yeah. Yeah, they've even opened for some folks in Portland. And
and they're just like total artists, creative professionals across the board in every single way. And they were like my second mom and dad. I just grew up in their house practically.
And it's Bo and Paul?
Yeah, her real name's Reba, but we always called her Bo. So.
Yeah, it's kind of the most on point folk singer brand. Like that's how I knew it was folk before you even said it. I'm like, oh, folk music, right? Because it's like, what else could it be? 50 years of singing together as a husband and wife. That's pretty amazing. On this Epic Life podcast, we always kick off with the 3 permissions, and I'm going to lay these out here for you, and you could just pick one and tell me what either resonates for you today or anyone that comes up for you stronger than the others. They are the permission to chill, represented by the pause button. I'm really into meditation, the permission to give ourselves a break, to take a break and relax and get connected. The permission to feel all the feels, which is kind of emotional intelligence meets bringing our beautiful, messy humanity with no apology. And then permission to glow in the dark. Maybe we met under these pretenses at some point in our past, but I used to only be concerned with the 3rd permission, and I had to discover the other 2. And that one is, I consider to be like self-expression or full self-expression with witnesses, unapologetic again. So when you think about permission to chill, to feel all the feels, to glow in the dark, what comes up for you today and why? And I'd love for each of you to take a swing at it.
I resonate with all of them, and I feel like I'm good at all of them, sort of. But I think the last one really is the one that resonates with me the most right now. And I just completed, actually on Alex's suggestion or Alex's example, The Artist's Way, Julia Cameron's.
It's so great. It never gets old. It's so great.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I've been hearing about for literally 20 years and thinking about doing for 20 years. And finally, the COVID thing gave me the opportunity to do that. And after doing it, the 12-week program where you sort of examine your creativity, own its sort of divine source, it's the first time in my life where I have now listed, and my ambition my entire life has been to be a writer since college, and I'm in my 50s now. And I've never really owned, and I've written, this is my 3rd book.
Right.
And, I've written stuff, but it's the first time where I've moved writer to the top of my description of who I am. So I am a writer who does other things rather than I am a consultant who writes or something like that.
Right.
It's hard for me to pick, but I will go with the second one.
Permission to feel all the feels.
Yeah. I think actually, and it's a great lead in for what we're going to talk about today, but I grew up in a semi-dysfunctional family with lots of trauma littered around and feeling ownership of all my emotions and believing my experience of what was happening as valid.
Yeah.
took a while.
Sure.
It took a while. And I see that play out in most of the adults that I know. And I see how it transmits from childhood through your entire life. And it's just a seemingly simple, but not easy, profoundly transformational thing to feel all your feelings.
Every single breakthrough that I've experienced in the past 3 years, I'm kind of a growth junkie, and all the breakthroughs have been on that tip, not the performance tip. Pretty comfortable there. Chilling, I've gotten better at that, but the feel, the feels. I love that you tied it to honoring your past too in some way, because making peace with that is definitely its own pathway to glowing in the dark, is to just to honor and accept all the craziness we come from.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So we're here to talk about radical alignment. I'd love to start with kind of the backstory of how this book came into being, because I know Alex from different lives, different roles, predominantly as a coach for women around food and wellness. And I know Bob from Agile and working with organizations, touching on communication for sure in there. My degree, by the way, is in communication and rhetoric. Oh. So I've always been obsessed with how to communicate. Just give me a synopsis of how did this come to be and why communication and why now?
It actually starts with the genesis of our relationship, and we've been together just under a decade. And, I'm still a coach. I've been a coach for about 20 years. Bob was a consultant. And we realized through the first couple of years that we were, even though he was working in organizations and I was working with individuals, we were both using a lot of the same tools and strategies to help either groups or individual people. And we decided to host a couple of couples workshops. And they were fine, but we realized that there was this one specific tool that we were using in the workshops that was totally foundational and important because people were coming to the workshops. I mean, it was basically like the woman dragging her boyfriend or husband, like, come to this workshop with me. They were coming with very different expectations and desires. Mm-hmm. And Bob had the beginnings of this tool that we'll talk about that really helped everybody kind of get on the same page and just get clear of why they were there.
We realized if people weren't on the same page, it was actually just the thing we did to start the workshop. We didn't even think of it as a tool. We were just like, we're going to start the workshop off with this first conversation just to make sure we're setting the ground in a good way. And it changed the outcome of the workshop. And the workshops didn't really last, but the tool did, and we ended up using it in our respective careers and in our respective worlds in different ways. And I'll also say that, like, I think with you working as a coach and me working as a consultant, we both were sort of struggling with the same thing, which was the subtext. We were realizing that the text, so in my world of agile or of organizational change and process, re-engineering in organizations, that you often think like, okay, let's get the process right. And then I kept finding things getting derailed. And I believe they were getting derailed, not because we weren't good at our process jobs, but because people weren't aligned like emotionally or as people, and that just kind of kept rearing its ugly head. And then when I would talk to Alex about her work with women, and when we were first together, a lot of her focus was on diet and health and wellness. And, actually her previous book, Women, Food, and Desire, really talks about this, but it's not the food. It's not like the nutritional content of the food that's the issue. It's how that food, how the food is positioned in their lives. I don't know if I'm.
Yeah. Why you eat.
Yeah.
And what you eat. There's a lot more to it than just, eat 10 grams of protein per meal.
Yeah.
So all those stories that are going on internally about what's my relationship to the food? How bad do I want it? Why do I want it so badly?
I think the thing I've been appreciating more and more, actually, as we've been talking about this book more and more and launching it, and is how important emotions are in really everything we do. And we often think of like reason and emotion as these separate things, but really, like emotions tell us what's important. They tell us where to focus our reason, where to focus our attention. And I just realized, like, over and over again. So now my work is almost entirely with leadership teams and kind of helping them be better teams, helping them make decisions, helping them develop strategy. And I just realized, like, I spend like a lot of my initial time with them just making sure they're like listening to each other, like they're demonstrating that they care about each other. All this stuff, which seems kind of woo-woo and kind of like personal development. Not that there's anything wrong with personal development, but it doesn't seem like it might have a place in a business context. And I just find everything goes so much better. It goes so much. And their minds are blown sometimes after the end of this conversation.
Well, and it also, when we met as part of the Good Life Project around Jonathan Fields and doing a lot of that work constantly throughout a year. And there's no such thing as too woo or too weird. And if it feels weird, lean in. And you start to realize once you get into businesses, all of this stuff feels very cutting edge and radical on some level. But at the base of it, we're just talking about how to relate as human beings, how to have empathy, how to get enrollment and, have your vibe be congruent with your words. Like anytime somebody says, I'm fine, I'm like, no, don't bullshit yourself or me. On the notes guide that came from Sounds True, your publisher, there's this great quote from Seth Godin. It's also on the jacket. Successful communication leads to intentional action, which can only happen with enrollment. And enrollment is such a key word, like we don't do anything without enrollment, and yet we do everything to hide if we're truly enrolled or not.
Interesting.
Like we're people to get through to that person that says, I'm fine, or in our marriages every single day, we're like, you're scrubbing the crap out of a dish and are you okay? Yeah, just dishes filthy. It's like, no, there's a lot more going on there. So what are some of those ways that you kind of get past those first couple protection layers that people put on to get them willing to have a conversation that deep?
That's a great question. I think, it's funny, actually, as you said that, I hadn't really even thought about it before. I was just so happy that Seth Godin gave us a comment. And that the word enrollment, I think, can be, it can actually be a little misleading in the way I think about it, because in a sense, like we can think about it as like, I'm going to enroll you, which means like, I'm going to use my charisma and my powers of persuasion to convince you that what I want you to do is a good idea. And I don't really think of it like that at all. Because I think that's a kind of a fundamentally, sort of command and control way of looking at
like
things,
sales,
which is not
traditional sales or whatever.
Traditional sales. And I think of it much more as let's see where we are aligned. Let's see where what I have is, and what I want is aligned with you. Actually, a former boss of mine, this is one of the best bosses I've ever had. When I got hired at the company, he's like, you're not going to stay here forever. We want you to swim along with us as long as you like, as long as it's beneficial to you. We want to, we want you to propel us and we'll propel you. And let's be really explicit and clear about that. And I was like, that's so refreshing. Because so often, it's like, you have to come here and be 100% dedicated to this job. And this job is now your life. And I think one of the things that sort of has changed in my view of this over the years is that like alignment is something that emerges and dissipates. And it's situational often. And it's something that gets discovered. And so when we say radical alignment, that's the promise of the book. But frankly, we're just as happy if you discover that you're not aligned and should probably not do that thing together, whatever it is you're trying to do, whether that's get married or start a company, or have a baby or whatever, right? Like forcing alignment is never is in my experience, never, it's not a sustained solution anyway.
Yeah, it really took me until the last 8 or so years to get good at this kind of conversation and discovery, because I thought I had to know the answer going into any important conversation, but it's through my relationship with you and our conversation about something that's important that we discovered together the way forward. So because of family programming, I wouldn't speak up unless I thought I knew the answer and could defend it.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But that's not a place to be creative. That's not a place to really have intimacy. So.
And I wouldn't speak up. I mean, I would do that. Or I would speak up only when I got like so full of emotion, like so upset
angry,
that I just couldn't keep it bottled in anymore. And then it would come out in let's just say an unproductive.
You blow your stack like Yosemite Sam. Like
yeah,
that's what,
exactly.
That's the tool set.
Yeah.
What
year did you both get married?
Oh, we always forget. 3 years ago?
4 years.
4 years ago, but we've been together about 9 or 10.
Yeah, our first.
We're terrible at remembering dates.
No, our first date was 2011.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, so I met you maybe a couple years into the new romance, but before you got actually officially married. So I kind of knew you as a unit.
Yeah, it took me a while to convince her that marriage was, a good idea.
Necessary.
She was firmly against.
We already had a few between the two of us. So
you've been married enough.
That was the thing that was coming up for me with what Alex was just sharing, was that the bravery it takes to host a couples workshop. Okay. When you're a newer couple, because you have like, jaded old longtime married couples in there thinking like, oh, you tell me what marriage looks like after 10 years or 15 years, whatever. What really struck me about your relationship was you always had this like kind of radical, raw honesty thing going on. Like I've seen Bob get up at conferences and give talks on topics that were just total squirmers, like in terms of just social comfort, especially in with an audience of typically corporate people, HR people. Yeah. How did you discover your compatibility based around how real, raw, authentic you were willing to be? Because I feel like that's always been a real brave component of your couplehood.
It's interesting. I know couples who go in for, they call it radical candor, radical honesty, or extreme honesty. I don't know what they call it.
I'm going to call you on yours.
Yeah, that. So we were both very clear that like, oh, there is something special here possible in this relationship. And it requires honesty with ourselves and each other, but really compassionately delivered. And, we're an evolution in progress for sure. I like to think that we're definitely getting stronger as we're going forward. But, it's funny when you talk about, how ballsy of you to teach a couples workshop when you've only been together a few years. Well, the thing that came out of those workshops is the heart of this book, because people after the workshop kept texting us, emailing, calling us. What was that 4-step thing that you taught us again? For like years after.
Yeah, the rest of the workshop was useless, I think.
Right. But this one thing people still comment on years later. And we're like, and we started using it in our marriage. And I truly credit this all-in method. Like, this has allowed us to have a really incredible level of communication that I have never had in a relationship before.
So did you start using it in your marriage in response to some of the demand of people asking for it? Like, oh, we should go back to this thing that we presented, or?
Yeah,
I think so. Or we just would have something difficult to talk about. And I think one of the things, in full transparency too, Alex is my 4th wife. After my 3rd divorce, I was like, okay, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice. There was a little bit of I'm the common denominator here. And I had really resigned myself. I was like, I know how to exist in the world as a single person. And, in a full way. I have friends, and I can, there's good Thanksgiving dinners to go to and fun to be had. And I had really sort of given up on the idea that I was going to be partnered in my life. And then I met Alex, and I was like, well, she's beautiful. She's interesting. She seems to really like me. And she's somebody who I want to support. And I was like, okay, this feels different.
And you didn't even get to the food skills. Like the food skills didn't even come into that part of it. And that's like a whole
amazing
other
baker.
level.
And so, but I also realized I have to do this differently. I have my own family trauma as well. And, I think it's not a mystery where some of my sort of bad habits come from. But one of the things I think we made a commitment to early on is that no topic of conversation is off limits. And then we also had, I kind of forgotten about this until recently. We also had the great good fortune to have one session with Esther Perel, who is an incredible couples therapist. You've probably read her books. Yeah. And, a lot of her specialty is around relationships and specifically infidelity, though we haven't had that problem, but it's, one of the things she said, I think during the session that just blew me away was she's like, look, if you stay together for a long time, you're not going to just have one relationship. You're going to have many relationships with the same person, your relationship is going to go through phases. And we're like, okay, if that's true, which I believe it is, and it definitely has played out with us, we also have to go through that consciously, which means bringing up some tough stuff sometimes. Yeah. I'm feeling a misalignment here, or I need something, or
something's changed,
or, and COVID has given us yet another opportunity to
nowhere to hide from the work.
More interesting conversation. Well, even just talking about COVID, it's like, do we have people over? Do we not have? How do we go to my mom's birthday party? Do we not? All of these really deep and important questions that have both an emotional component, intellectual component, a relational component. And I think one of the things we've really prided ourselves on, not always neatly have we done it, but it always leads somewhere good, is to not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Yeah, I'm just not afraid. Yeah. I'm not afraid to have tough conversations with you, because I'm like, oh, we have a way we've done it before. We have a way to get through it. And I know, I can trust you, and we trust each other to hold each other in that space now.
Last question on the origin story, Bob Gower. What was it that made you, after 3 marriages, say it's going to be number 4, and I'm going to convince this woman who doesn't want to do it to get married? What made you push to go for the one that stuck?
Attraction is a dime a dozen in some ways, right? We can be, at least for me, you walk down the street, you're like, I had a friend who said something like, it was a female friend, is like, yeah, I just fall in love with people walking down the street. I'm like, oh, there's that person. And a friend of mine always says that falling in love with people is a really terrible reason to get into a relationship with them. That's the word. And I realized I had always followed passion. I'd always followed excitement and passion, which of course really doesn't last, or it's not the only feature of a relationship, right? In reality, over the long period, it comes and goes. And I think the things that really convinced me to want to be a partner with somebody and for life, to really partner, were Alex is just such an amazing kind person. She's a great mother. Like watching her parent my stepson, her child, was just such a healing experience for me. And also I just, like the work she's done in the world, like on our first date, I was like, so what do you do? And she's like, oh, I made this little movie called Super Size Me. Maybe you saw it. Oh my God. Like,
right. Oh, that Alex Jameson.
Oh, that Alex Jameson. I was totally in love with you 8 years ago when I saw that movie in the theater. Like I thought you were so hot. Like I still do. And this is amazing. But
yeah,
but like
you were like the heroine of the movie. Like you saved the life. Like you were, yeah. You're like the hipster girlfriend, amazing vegan chef heroine. Yeah.
I'm blushing.
Yeah. That's who we're talking to.
And so, I was just like, I want to help this person do whatever she's going to do in the world. Do you know what I mean? Like it was, and I think one of the things we say about our relationship or good relationships is they're not 50-50, they're 100-100. Like, it's not like I'm going to put in my half and wait for you to put in your half, but it's more like, no, I'm into you. I'm dedicated to you. I'm dedicated to this. And it took a while for us. I think we had to, for a few years, you sort of date and you work through the different edges. And then after a while, it was like, well, we're together.
Let's do this.
We're together. Like, let's combine assets.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's get a tax break.
Might as well go all in. So let's shift over to the framework itself. I love what you said about bringing 100 and 100 to a relationship. And did that inform the naming of the method, the all-in method? Who named it and how did that come up?
Actually, it took a while to get there. I don't even remember how we got there, but it wasn't the obvious first choice.
Yeah, the initials of the method, it's a 4-part conversation, was ICBD.
We called it ICBD for years, and I was like, that sounds like
doesn't flow
missile.
as much.
ICBM.
The beautiful irony would be is if both of you were dug in on a name and you wanted to murder each other and screamed and fought until you named the all-in method. I'd be like, wow, they used the method to name the method.
Well, the all-in was mine.
I would love to know any recent examples come to mind, either working with a client or working in your own relationship where you applied the method. And you don't have to get too much into the nitty-gritty details, but I guess the first question is, how does one side know when something is significant enough to have the structured conversation?
Sometimes we're unclear of it. I mean, we actually did start to have a personal conversation using the method a week or so ago, and we were like, no, this isn't the right place for it. We just need to talk through something here. We don't need the method for this.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. But we did use it to talk about this book. It's kind of a meta conversation. Like, we use the method to talk about writing the book about the method.
Yeah.
But for a very specific reason, I want to bring that up because, we're a married couple and we're working on a creative project together. I had a lot of concerns.
Yeah, it's
worried.
making me nervous even thinking about it. I mean, family members, even family by design, my marriage, my wife, working on flower beds is its own level of intensity. But working on a book over how long end to end to do this, couple years, a year?
Yeah.
A couple of years.
Over
yeah.
Years.
I would say actually it's almost like 4 years since the project had the seed of the project to versions to deals.
What's really important is that you pick a very specific topic. So it's something that you can really hone in. Okay, we're going to talk about this. And that's to avoid emotional overwhelm and topic creep, right? Like, you don't want to be talking about a book project and then all of a sudden, but you said 3 years ago to my mother, but you don't want to it's like, okay, let's keep it concise to a topic. So if you can get that far.
Yeah. And I think the thing that I look for when I use it, or when I suggest that we're going to use it, and right now we actually have a couple kind of queued up potentially as well, but is I'm looking for that little itch inside, that feeling that something's not quite right, not quite aligned. And sometimes I have to bump up against it a couple of times before it's there. Mm-hmm. And so for writing the book, we had been, I hope you don't mind. So Alex, when she made this iconic movie, it was not a partnership that turned out, there was some hurt feelings afterwards. Is that fair to say?
Oh yeah. I mean, there were lawyers involved.
Okay.
It got ugly.
And so when we got together, and I had my own experience of disappointment in relationship with combining that with work and business and trying to do projects together. So we made this very almost explicit agreement. We will not do anything together. And we almost didn't even talk about our work that much.
Yeah.
You know, we would talk about kind of the emotional content of the work, but we wouldn't talk about the work, you know, like we wouldn't solve business problems together. We just were a couple.
Yeah.
Who had our own separate businesses and our own separate lives. And then, but this book kind of kept coming up as this thing that we should try together, that we should, you know, like we were like, you're really, like, first I was going to write it by myself, and then maybe I was going to write it with somebody else. And then it just never felt right. Now it's like, I looked at her one day, I think we were on the beach in New Hampshire or something. And we're like, it's like, you have to do this with me. Like, this is us.
Yeah.
And then it took a long time after that. So anyway, so the first thing we did was, okay, now let's use the method to talk about the book, because clearly we're scared to do a project together, or we have concerns about doing a project together. And by the way, in ICBD, the C is concerns. So we knew we needed to air all those out. Mm-hmm. Do you want to walk us through it, or?
Yeah.
So really quick reflection for my listeners, because a lot of coaches listen and a lot of people who are being coached. There's a huge difference if you would have before that kind of no-fly policy, like we will not talk about collaborations or we will not cross that line because this has gone bad for me before personally. That's from inside the survival mechanism or the protective bubble. But what I love about where we're going right now is that you're taking steps out into the unknown, into creating new possibilities. And to do that, you have to be willing to lay the cards on the table and kind of see what you're working with. So this is just to underline, this is we're getting into like brave work territory here, because I think of you're inspiring because I think of what is possible for my wife and I to do something together. First of all, break down the mnemonic, the ICBD. Can we use this conversation as an example of it?
Of course. Yeah. So we defined the topic. That's really the first step. And maybe a little bit of why. And by the way, we also have not made the decision to do it yet. You know, like we're still like, let's see if we're aligned. So that's kind of the spirit that you enter in. It's a spirit of curiosity, and it's a spirit of discovery. And even if it's a work project and you have decided, you know, like where people are sort of mandated to be there, we still sort of want to, I do my best to kind of set up an exploratory mindset. And so the 4 steps are, we just discuss our intentions, our concerns, our boundaries, and our dreams as they relate to the topic at hand. And the way the questions get framed can be, you know, you have to be kind of careful or specific about them because it changes from context to context. But those are the buckets. And we knew the top, you know, we didn't have to like do that work ourselves because we knew what they meant. But like, so my intentions for writing this book were to, well, I think there's a meta intention, which was let's try to do something together. Like that was kind of a fun sort of thing. Like, let's see if this works. The other is, of course, there's you mentioned our friend Charlie Gilkey, and there's a book-shaped hole in my business. You know, like books are great for business. You know, like they're just so good at establishing you as an expert and helping people find you and all of that. And then the third thing was, I think that we had seen so much good come out of this process. I was like, more people need this. I just feel like it's a good thing to release into the wild. It's not exactly like, it doesn't encompass all of my business. It's kind of actually a very small part of what I do, but it, you know, and you as well. But it was like, but it's such a valuable little part. And I think this is what we need.
Yeah. And I had all the same intentions, and, you know, I've written a few books, and I know that they're a great way to grow your business and, you know, introduce yourself to new potential clients and maybe even make a little money. And that's okay to admit that you might want to make money doing something that you enjoy doing.
being you. Yeah. Making money being you.
Yeah. And I also do want to preface this by saying, you know, there's a few kind of setting the scene things that we talk about in the book in more detail. Like, we recommend not doing this conversation like late at night when you're both tired. You know, be well fed, you know, set aside time for these kinds of conversations. Maybe if you can even like, you know, be well fed and the kids are doing something else and you can just have some space.
And not intoxicated in any way.
No alcohol whatsoever. Yeah. So just really being clean and clear about it. Clear and present. And then you go into your concerns. And this is a great place to actually be vulnerable and be brave. And the listener, like, be really present and be curious. we've talked with our Harvard neuroscientist friend, Dr. Srini Pillay, and he's like, actually, when you speak your concerns out loud and your fears in a safe space, the amygdala can actually calm down. Your nervous system can actually relax because it's been received and you didn't die. You said it out loud and you didn't die. And your body's like, oh, I can. Yeah. Okay.
And your brain heard you say it out loud. There's actually the act of speaking it is more powerful than writing it. It's actually, even if you're by yourself, the act of speaking it can be more powerful.
Yeah. So express even the deepest, darkest fears. And Bob and I both had the same one.
Bob, what was Alex's primary concern about writing a book with you?
That we were going to get divorced and die alone under bridges.
Yeah.
Separate bridges.
Oh, wow.
Not the same bridge.
It's going to go so badly. It's going to destroy our lives. We'll get divorced and we'll die alone under a bridge.
Oh, that's all.
That's all. That's all. Wow. And so, one of the things about concerns, which we've found so powerful over the years, and originally, like when we first started off, it was just like, oh, like you're here today. What are you concerned about? And we were almost like constraining it to like reasonable concerns. But our brains are really, really efficient worry machines, especially when you have a childhood like mine. But I worry about everything, and I've been trained to worry about everything. And a lot of people have the same thing. And, the human brain has a strong negativity bias by design. And so it's just like, let all that stuff out, let the crazy out. And we sort of we almost set it up as a fun thing to do. Like, let's have like what crazy thing are you potentially worried about here?
Yeah. And with kind of the shared agreement, and we invite everybody listening to do this when you run through the process yourself, like, don't be offended by your partner's fears. Right? It's not, my fears are really not about you. Even if they involve you, it's really like my machine coming up with the worst possible scenario that may have no basis in reality. I
almost hear it as don't make their fears about you. Right? Everyone is entitled to their fears and concerns, and just let them out and don't take it personally that it's your stuff.
Right.
And don't try to fix them. We also say we set it up so we don't argue or we don't talk. Like, we're just in listening mode. Like, this conversation is really, the idea behind it is really to have the most rich informational landscape possible when you go into planning mode, which is what you can go into next. Like, we're not about planning. We're not about negotiating. We're not about, problem solving, though some of that sometimes naturally emerges from the process. The process is really just about developing empathy and learning and understanding each other. It's really just about listening.
Yeah. So once you get all your fears and concerns out, you go into boundaries. And depending on whether this is a personal topic or a workplace thing, they might be very different conversations. But, for us, for the book, our boundaries became very tactical over time. Like, we're going to use Google Docs together, and this is how we will edit together, which actually went really beautifully, by the way. I don't want to work on the weekends, or I only want to write on Saturdays, or, you just come up with what are the things that I need to be my best in this?
And we had one that was specifically related to our concern, that shared concern that we talked about. And that was that it was almost like a project safe word or something. It's like either of us could sort of tap out at any time and say, I'm done. And the other person would be free to take the project and move forward with it as a personal project.
Cool.
And so it was just sort of like, okay, because if it starts to feel like, because we realize that experience of this is damaging the relationship, that may be a one-sided experience. And so if it's a one-sided experience, then if I'm experiencing it and you're not, then I should be able to be like, whoa, this is too much. I'm going to back out and let the project run. So I'm going to prioritize my own health, the health of our relationship, and the health of the project over perhaps my preference, again, to my personal preference.
And to calm down my fears from past relationships, we came up with the boundary that, this is even though one of us might end up writing a little bit more than the other at some point, this is a 50-50 project in terms of credit.
Yeah.
We will both be credited for the work.
Yeah.
And
I think did we even get some legal paperwork at one point that said that? Because I think we had, at some point we had to like put the project underneath one of at that time we had separate legal entities for our businesses. Now we have the same with different DBAs, but it was like, oh, it's going to be under my business, but I'm going to make sure that you feel that it's 50% yours. And I think we even had like a written agreement at one point.
Yeah.
Everything with the boundaries topic seems like it stays in service of the other person. It's like the collaboration structures of how this is going to work for both of us, but that non-attachment to, who gets to move forward with it. Should I decide to bow out? That's totally in service of the other person succeeding regardless, which I love. And it also reminds me that 90%, 95% of like crappy exchanges in a marriage, in my experience, have been when there's like this like measuring stick of, I already unloaded the dishwasher today, it's your turn. And we're on the same team. We should just like want to step up and do it, right? But any time of that, trying to stay even all the time or competing over some way, it's always a recipe for somebody feeling that they're not, that they're getting the short end of the stick.
I love that so much. There's like a difference between having a partner and having a roommate, like the chore wheel with a partner. It doesn't, the tit for tat kind of thing doesn't really work. It's like, it's not your dishes and my dishes. It's like our dishes.
Right.
And I want the sink clean, so I should clean the sink.
I have this joke with my wife now. Like if I go like gangbusters and clean the entire kitchen and it's like super immaculate and sparkly, I won't say anything for like 5 minutes. But if she doesn't compliment me on it or thank me in some way, I'll start singing, what a man, what a man, what a man, what a mighty good man. And she's like, shut up. Like you don't deserve like a parade down Main Street for like, being part of the team, So,
oh man, I have that so much.
That's funny.
Like, I did laundry. I'm a good
Look
male.
at Bob doing the laundry. Holy crap. He used like bounce and everything. Oh my God.
Do you have 20 minutes? Let me tell you what I did today.
Yeah. Well, one of my friends corrected me, like right after we had children. He called and he said, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm babysitting. He's like, newsflash, if it's your child, you're not babysitting. Right. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for we get through boundaries and into the last kind of category of dreams. I feel like this is what I hoped when I saw the book and I started getting into it. I hope it wasn't just like kind of remediation on broken habits in relationship, meaning like, here's how to get through difficult conversations only. It absolutely covers those bases, but where it gets into dreams, then it gets into like breakthrough territory on the radical alignment side of things. Tell me what made you add this section and how you applied it and what it looked like around the book.
We very specifically have it as the last step because it really brings you back together. If anything's going to like get you into radical alignment, there may have been some stuff in the first 3 steps that you need to figure out and game plan. But when I hear your dreams, like talk about an oxytocin explosion, when you really share your dreams with each other about like what will be true for you if this goes well, for me if this goes well, you want this to go well for us and for the world, like you really start to get into exciting territory. And that's the place where you can really get on each other's team.
Oh, that's awesome. It just feels very expansive. It feels like the relationship is much bigger than 1 + 1 at that point.
Yeah. And it was a late add to the process, actually. I think it came in after we'd done intentions, concerns, and boundaries for a while. And it was like, yeah, this feels like work. It's good. Like it's good work, but we want a little dessert after the healthy meal, and I do think it really ties it up really beautifully because intentions tells me, like, okay, we're writing the book because we want to make some money. We want to make some impact. We want to try a project together. Okay. So that gets us through the door. That's our intention. But what if those things went really well? Like, what if what kind of impact are we talking about? What kind, and, how many copies would we sell in the first week? How, and really allow ourselves to kind of dream. And then that gets you sort of asking the question about like, well, okay, well, if that's our dream, then how can we do that? And then that's actually even more wonderful information for the planning process.
I just hear it as very motivating to motivate yourself with the other person's dreams too. It's like it's so much easier and nourishing to do it for the other than to do it for ourselves. Sometimes to hear our partner's dreams is really beautiful.
And it can be hard to hear and express concerns and boundaries. But when you get into dream territory, you're like, oh, this is why I want to do this. The project is like writing a book. This was actually a wonderful process together, but it's still hard work.
Oh, yeah. Going through it myself.
Right.
Yeah.
And to have the dream that's the fuel that really keeps you going.
Yeah. I don't know whether this is universal or not, but for me, including the other person in my dream, or our relationship, we'll be, and I also like to make dreams kind of visual, okay, we're going to be sitting at the Mandarin Oriental Hotel, which looks out over Central Park. It's like up on the 34th floor of this building, which I'd love the view from there. Having a glass of champagne, celebrating launch day. Of course, we're not going to get this now because COVID, but and I'm going to be, and how I'm going to be feeling about you. Like, I'm going to be feeling so proud. I'm going to be feeling close to you. I'm, really including all of that stuff in it, because I think that's the real reward. Like, we're not here. What is it? Somebody said, I read this thing the other day, one of these Instagram quotes that, actually spoke to me. But it's like, we don't want to make money. We want freedom, right? Like, so like going underneath, like, okay, you've made the money, but what has the money given you? You've made the impact, but what has the impact given you on a visceral, personal level? Yeah. And really getting in touch with that, I find really rewarding.
In terms of dreams for this book, what do you want it to do for the readers? Like, what's the kind of feedback you hope you get from people reading it?
I've been coaching really driven, successful women for several years now. And the stories that they come back to me with around how much more efficient and graceful their home life is because their family's communicating in a new way, and how much more success they're having at work because they're able to really become a leader in communication at work is a really powerful skill set. And it gets you a lot of good attention. But I'll share with you something from our own family. Like, just a couple weeks ago, our 13-year-old son, just out of nowhere at the dinner table, said, "I'm really glad I'm being raised learning how to care about other people's feelings." And to hear that from a young man in times like these, where, he knows what empathy is, he understands why it's important, and he's got that skill set now. I wish I had had that when I was 13. I wish I'd had this. I wish I had been able to talk about tough things 20 years earlier. And I just want to get it into as many people's hands so that they can get past those blocks.
It's healing.
Faster.
It seems very healing.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I'm always grateful when people take it and do something with it, right? They take it home and honestly, like, when I think about the person who wrote the foreword to the book, Rebecca Barucki, who is an incredible, leader and entrepreneur and mother of 5. Like, we wouldn't have this book if she hadn't come back to us again and again and told us what a difference the process had made in her life and in her work and in her home. And I think that's to me is the most gratifying. Where I've had colleagues, I've actually had 2 colleagues come up to me recently, former colleagues come to me recently, pre-COVID, but recently enough, and tell me that this process actually helped them plan their weddings, which were, which had a degree, each of them had a degree of complexity about it because of family dynamics. And
did they steal your metric of high, joy, low drama?
I don't know if they did, but
I don't know, but I love that that you got that.
I love that.
Yeah. No, I'm like, damn, I wish I could go back and plan my wedding. That was such a stressful pain in my ass. But I was only 20 or whatever. No, I love that. So you're saying that you want people to actually use it and apply it.
Yeah, use it.
100%. And tell me about it, actually.
Oh my God, we love hearing
I love hearing stories.
Like the middle school teacher who got an early copy and is teaching it to her 7th and 8th graders. I'm like, oh my gosh, tell me everything about that.
All right, I just had the idea. Here's what I'm going to do. I want to ask you we'll talk offline about the best date for this episode to run to support your August 11th street date. But when I send out the email to our list and share it out, I'm going to challenge every single person to apply the framework in a conversation and report back and share their story.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, because that way we can, it's good for me too. Cause it's getting people to share something beyond like how badly they feel about what's going on right now, and where we could get traction, where we can move things in the direction we want them to go. So I would love to create a challenge around that with you guys.
Awesome.
Great.
Thank you.
Well,
we could support you. We could give you a cheat sheet or something, like give you something to share out.
Yeah, I would love the cheat sheet.
Yeah.
I love the cheat sheet at the back of the book. I was going to ask if that's available in a PDF or something. That'd be really cool to share.
You got it.
We'll get you one.
Yeah.
And gosh, thanks for spending part of your afternoon with me. I'm equal parts starstruck, enamored, and grateful, and patting myself on the back because I get to hang out with people like this. There's a lot of emotions for me right now. Thanks for making this a great conversation.
We're honored and loved being here with you.
Thank you so much.
More to come. And thank you so much for listening. If you found this useful, please, by all means, share it. You can find us everywhere online at This Epic Life. And you could hop over to Apple Music and leave us a much appreciated review.